Today we have Gordon Freeman, who is the president and founder of the National Laboratory of Educational or for Educational Transformation. And I'm really excited about having this conversation, not only because he has a wealth of experience, but he knows the broad range of education and some of the key elements that we should be looking for to engage in real transformation at a critical time in our history and in the economy globally. How you doing, Gordon?
Great, Ahmad. Nice to see you today. Happy to
Same
be part
here.
of this.
Man, I'm so happy to have this conversation with you because I feel like I'm talking to a real adult in the room, you know, someone who really knows a broad range about education and workforce and learning and some of the challenges and opportunities that we have today. So if you don't mind, just kind of sharing a little bit more about who you are and yeah, and what you do.
Okay, well, thanks for the opportunity. You know, in my world, in my personal world, my personal mission, it's education transformation, it's working in the workforce area. But at the base of it, I feel that human dignity has the right to access to education and training, participation in the economy, with the fewest things between that person and those opportunities. Okay. And we're living in a world with very, very rich technology. But unfortunately, in the worlds that we're living in, education, which at a K-12 level is a government activity, really, and at a higher education level, it's government and it's survival for those higher education institutions. But those are traditional organizational structures that in many ways don't line up with how society works today. So in today's world, somebody at any age almost have multiple accounts. You have a social media account, you have consumer accounts, you do your banking online. If you're young people, you're communicating all the time. But the education environment has participated a little bit in that, but it's not going to give up its structure. So, in every other part of society, including medicine now, where you can go on and have your own individual records, um, there have been massive changes on how organizations work. In education, that hasn't happened. And in the workforce arena, it's even more complicated because the government, federal government, set up the workforce system many years ago at state levels, at local levels, and those oftentimes are political positions. They're appointed. And what we don't have in education is a lot of deeper science and analysis about what
Absolutely.
we really need. Okay. So that's my premise. That's where I'm coming from. And I didn't come up as an educator. I didn't come up as an education technologist. I came up as a person in the news, as a person that worked on
Really?
Capitol Hill. And I looked at solving problems in many different ways. And then how did I get into education? It's very simple. You know, my now 32-year-old who's providing online education securely into prisons, I walked him into kindergarten in the Pacific Palisades in California, a really well-heeled place. And that kindergarten didn't look any different than mine, 30 some years
Yeah.
before in
Yeah.
northern Michigan. And I just went crazy and said, this just isn't right. So that's the basic background for me as a human, saying we got to do this right. It's not about my position, it's about making change.
I love it. And interestingly, I mean, you said so many nuggets in there. And one of the things that you've essentially talked about was kind of the gatekeeping of the institutions, because right now we have an economy where the way there's an economy where people talk about talent a lot. They
Right.
talk about the need for talent, but still wanting to kind of gatekeep how talent is actually gets an opportunity to develop itself, how it has
Right.
a chance to cultivate itself. And interestingly, I took a design thinking class years ago, and um, first we had to do some visualization. And so for me as an educator, it was kind of this free form. And so I wrote this. They wanted to know how the current state and the future state of education, how I
Mm.
perceived it. And so I had the current state with these three big pillars in this big kind of round educational or big box educational system, with the individual on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
And the future state I had as the individual right smack dead in the middle with all of the other resources around it. And that's what something that you said in your intro that made me think about that is how we should be designing around the learner, because the learner is everywhere now. It's just not about those who get to, you know, pass through the gates
Yeah.
and get blessed, but they're everywhere. And one more thing I'll say about this, just to open it up, is, you know, when we think about talent, we think about it from, I like to say the McKinsey model, you know, the top
Mm-hmm.
10, you know, where now talent should be seen as being everywhere,
Yes.
and how that talent should have access to cultivating their own unique capabilities,
Yeah.
and not being compared to any particular rubric or any type of benchmark for what passes as talent. Um, anyway, I'll leave it there.
Okay. No, you're right. So the we've used the line about, student centric, learner centric, but that's really a bureaucracy talking. It's
Absolutely.
not. And so the question is, how do you give as much opportunity as possible to people and minimize the hoops they have to go through, and then be very honest that many people make a living by saying that they're doing these things, and they may be very well intended,
Yeah.
but the numbers don't show up.
Yeah.
And to your point, we're in an economy now, in a demography where we're having fewer young people coming out of schools because the baby boomers, are done, that big, and the people that are coming after them, it's a smaller population.
Absolutely.
And we're walking into an employment scene now where we need all kinds of people. And we have a revolution that's between blue and white collar, where you can be welding or operating a CNC machine and making $100,000
Absolutely.
plus and not doing email at nighttime. So it's been a real problem to figure out who are the stewards for this. So if you're a steward, you're not thinking about your salary first. You're thinking about, how do I move people forward, or how do I give them the opportunity to move forward, and how do I give them the tools to track whether that's going on. So I think you're absolutely right. Your diagram that you drew is earnest and true, but it ran up against a pretty seated kind of community. So let's go at how we might look at this. Um, I had been in the education technology space at Blackboard, and I was their global education strategy person, and went all over the world. And while I took my job seriously for the software, I really cared much more about how we would get to a point where education and training would begin to get to the level of how the information age operates.
Sure, sure.
So we've never gotten there. We have online learning, but it's not the same. And now we have these big data models, so it's not the same there. So in 2011, after I'd been at Blackboard and I became kind of a leader in the education tech space, I realized that we weren't giving the vehicles for young people or any people to be able to operate, how they might operate on LinkedIn, or how they might do something else like that. But LinkedIn isn't available to people who don't have a background yet,
Yeah.
or have had challenges of many sorts. So in 2011, I came up with a concept for a DARPA, a government research agency
Love it.
focused on human capital. And I was all bushy-tailed and excited, and I actually took it to the Obama White House, got to the right people. They essentially took it out of my hands, took it up to Congress, and got ARPA Ed
Oh,
through
wow. Wow.
legislation.
I
But
think I remember that too.
they never got any funding.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, I'm out here in the West Coast. I kind of understand technology. I'll put a little organization together. And at the time, I had gotten introduced, because of my previous work in film and television, to a couple of our national laboratories. So I put together a model that I called the National Lab for Education Transformation. And what I meant for that, so if you think about it, we've got, you've got a lot of innovation activity, but it rarely goes to the base of what you would need to transform at a higher level.
Sure.
And if you're going to transform something at a higher level, the individuals have to be part of it. So when we set up the National Lab, we set it up as a boutique R&D nonprofit. And in a lot of ways, it's for people who worked in government and in industry and said all the right words, but really couldn't get to the right thing. We didn't want to be a nonprofit that lived to just get its next contract or grant.
Yeah.
So we've ended up digging into two things over the time since 2011. One is mathematics. So mathematics is the largest equity barrier in the United States.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it starts in third and fourth grade because the teachers who teach third and fourth grade, by and large, don't understand math. The other problem is structural in K-12. So if I come in and I'm a young, really motivated third or fourth grader, I get really excited about numbers. The next year I go into fifth grade and teacher doesn't care. She doesn't see me in the back of the room. She doesn't care that I really am excited about this. She's just going through whatever she needs to do. So there's no continuity from year to year on what I've learned in mathematics. And what happens is if you don't learn in third, fourth, and fifth grade your fractions and decimals,
Yeah.
you won't be able to do algebra. And if you can't do algebra, your earning potential goes down.
Absolutely.
Right?
So with the lab, I mean, one of the things that sticks out for me is the term educational transformation.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, what are some of the key transformations that you think need to take place in education right now? And the reason why I say right now is because I work from a place of urgency with education, and we can no longer look into the future when you have exponential technologies that are showing up.
Well, and as you know, COVID blasted a hole in the education battleship.
Absolutely.
So I was just reading an article about the District of Columbia. The truancy rate is so high and the attendance is, there's no way to really sustain that.
Yeah.
So what we're doing in the lab always follows the same pattern. And that is, we don't want to take and, turn education into Facebook. On the other hand, the tools that make that work, community, an individual account, data in the back end, systems have to migrate there.
Yeah.
And that doesn't really threaten a school or a community college because in a sense, they could adopt and use that kind of technology inside. So for example, the math product that we have is called Just-in-Time Math, 735 micro competencies from fourth grade through pre-calc.
Oh, wow.
So math in this country really should be, what am I going to do with it? So if I'm a kid who's made it to ninth grade and I'm doing okay and I'm thinking of college, then I got to make sure I can get, either through pre-calc or calculus. But I might have missed some things. So I could come back and remediate through this system. Or let's say that I've decided that I want to be a med tech or even an auto tech. You can't get certified for either one of those without the math that you need. A lot of it's algebra, early algebra. So what if there's a system out there that's almost like a dispensary machine where tutors can help with this and others, but I can go in and learn things that I didn't know or forgot that are part of the math I need. So we have a contract now, a sizable one, with the California Community College system to install this system and provide what's called co-requisite education. So we've gotten rid of developmental ed because it really was an equity barrier.
Yeah.
And now they're experimenting with this. So if I'm coming in and all I want to do is go get a sociology degree, but I'm going to need my basic math, we take care of that. If I'm coming in and I really want to go on to a 4-year from that community college, and I really think that I'm going to need physics and chemistry, then the math for physics and chemistry can be pulled out. So, but the transformation here is that we're going to go from a grade to grade structure and a sequence in math that nobody's completing except for a handful of well-supported children to a system where what's the math for? How can we adopt it? Now, that would be the transformation would be that technology will sit on the web. It'll be open and I can get an account on there. On the other hand, my school could adopt it. My community college could. So the things have to be in the open, usable by individuals, as you pointed out, or by institutions or intermediaries.
That's great. I love it. So let's say in the community college or at a college, a student shows up. What's their entry point? What's their touch point with the technology?
So then when they come in, there's a determination early on about A, what they're going to do, and B, how much math and English as well. But in our case, it's math that they need. And we're not in the position of blaming people or schools for the past anymore.
Sure.
Just pick that student up where they are. And so if they need support, then they would be doing this co-requisite work. They would be getting credit for it, which they didn't get before in developmental ed.
Mm-hmm.
And they would be in cohorts that are going through the similar thing, so that the California community college systems and the CSU, by law, have to do this now. And the community college system is doing a wonderful job in the chancellor's office of making this real. So I would get assessed and not labeled, but just where am I?
Sure.
What do I need? And then I would be put into that kind of co-requisite structure, depending what was necessary.
I love it. One of the things that pops up for me, actually being a former dean, is, and the reason why I mentioned the touch point is because, at the community colleges, or at any college, the experience design of students.
Yes.
There's two things I like to think about with students. A, what is the experience design that's being created to make that creates more fluidity in their learning experience?
Right.
And then secondly is what is the behavioral economics that are connected to this? And I say behavioral economics because that's something that's not considered a lot. And that is really like, how do students make decisions? Because a lot of times they make decisions that are totally different than how we assume they make decisions. And sometimes those decisions are over some factors that has nothing to do with what your assumptions have been. So
absolutely.
Excuse me?
I would say absolutely. I'd like to see two columns. One has the math going up the line here, and the other has all the things you can buy, from getting a house to going out to dinner 6 times a month. They're directly correlated, and nobody's going to tell you that as a kid. And then, it's all about how can I get what I want and be a good citizen at the same time. And so math is a big part of that. And there's nobody that I know or no organizations that's focused on that the way we are.
Great. So can you share another educational transformation that you think needs to take place right now and into the future?
The other one that we concentrate on is education to employment. So in other words, when you go on the web, and this was the thing that always bothered me, and then the co-founder of another company we're working with bothered him, is you can't go online and say, sit down with your kids in 8th or 9th grade or 10th or 11th grade and say, oh, let's go to that app or that website, which will tell you algorithmically, hey, why don't you go get a welding certificate for 2 years? And then if you really want to do whatever you want to do, could be dance, it could be, it could be being an accountant, make some money, put it in the bank, and help find a company that will sponsor you for that 4-year degree. Or if you're intent on going all the way and being a biochemist, there's no place to go. There are only websites to colleges and universities in the training and workforce programs. So we need technology that spans from education and training and how that's related to the active job market. Some people have used the term E to E, education to employment.
Yeah.
And so starting in 2013, we had a Gates grant that looked at how you could structure something as a single technology. So if I go to college right now, or even in high school, I'm generally using what's called a learning management system. So I'm in Canvas or Blackboard or something. When I leave, I don't have that. Okay. All of a sudden that record's gone away. Or let's say I'm a 19-year-old and I'm taking a community college course. I'm getting a Microsoft certification, and I've got some things I've done in the past. Each one of those, from the point of view of Microsoft, that community college, and I'm a different person.
Yeah.
Yet I'm only one person. So why isn't there any unification? So we had a
So
gate.
are you talking about like having a platform that would be like a badging or portfolio system, let's say like a Credly that allows for you
It
to,
would include that, but let
yeah,
me just say, in this broad spectrum from
yeah,
education to employment, there are all kinds of players. There are all kinds of fractional players. There are all kinds of grants that are out there. But I look at Expedia. You know, you and I are old enough to have had to go to travel agents and
absolutely.
get an airline here, get a car here, get a hotel here.
Yep,
What does that take? It takes a minute and a half, 2 minutes to set up a trip now. Okay, those were three different databases.
absolutely.
They were cars, planes, and hotels. I ended up getting an account on Expedia. It knows all of those and they're connected, right? Okay, now let's go to three artifacts that really need transformation: resume,
Mhm.
course listings, program listings, job postings. They're all aspects of the same thing. So in essence, we have written grants and we have been involved, and now we're involved with a company that takes each one of those, breaks it down to a skills level, and that skills level
Mm.
then can translate what those courses have in terms of skills. They can translate the jobs, and they can put those together and say to me, hey, you're qualified to go do this, or you really have some gaps.
You know,
In that
wow.
process, you might get a badge or two, but this is a system that faces people on the web. You don't have to get it through the college or the workforce agency.
Yeah.
So our whole theory of transformation is A, it has to be on the web and open, and B, it has to involve those stakeholders that play in the game.
Gordon, you're hitting on a lot of just unbelievable topics here that I just been waiting to have a conversation with
Yeah.
because, you know, when you mentioned the courses, you know, one of the things I often say is that you need to unbundle the course. You know, like there's a lot of different skill sets
Yeah.
that can show up, especially when you're doing things like CTE, when you're doing that type of training, some type of technical
Right.
training, that the title of a course doesn't say enough about, you
Not enough.
know, about what's there. And interestingly, because, you know, I had a chance to speak with a young woman who was a nursing major at the nursing school that was under me. And, you know, she had passed the boards, and our nursing school was at Merritt College was one of the, it was, had the top scores in California,
Yeah.
pass rates. And she wanted to really get into the health side of it. But she had been trained so much to just think about graduating and going into the hospital setting
Yeah.
that she did not necessarily look at some of those other skills that were embedded into all her training.
Yeah.
And so I helped her kind of unbundle everything that she had done, even though I'm not a, you know, my background's not nursing, but I was able to
Yeah.
like speak with her about some of these courses and some of the simulations and skills. And then I had her actually end up taking some more health courses in our nutrition
Mm-hmm.
program.
Mm-hmm.
And she ended up forgoing, you know, the traditional route and going into health,
Yeah.
where she has this scientific mind now that can really
Yeah.
break down a lot of things, but still look at health in a much more holistic way.
Yeah.
And she is doing fantastic in her
Great.
profession now. You know, so what you just stated there is just a very strong example of how these things need to be broken up and how technology can be a matchmaker, can help you kind of like
Absolutely.
create what you want. One more thing I want to say on this, because once again, you hit on many different areas, and that is, you know, the technology that can close the skill matching. Because, you know, when we talk about workforce development, you know, you're talking about an inefficient system, you know, where the skills matching and the connections, I mean, it's just the worst scenario that we can create for someone who's trying to design their career their
Absolutely.
way.
So let me tell you where this went. So after from 2013, to 2019 or so, we worked on a bunch of things. We worked on the government during the Obama administration had something called the TAC grants,
Yep. Yep.
TAACCCT,
Yep.
$1.9 billion. And it was to connect employers with, and you guys probably had one, it was to connect employers with colleges to get the programming at the college to match what the employer needed.
Yep.
Okay. So they didn't, in the beginning, when the Department of Labor handed out that money, they didn't require that it be connected to the ONET schedules on what the jobs are. And they didn't require them to put it in one kind of content management or learning management system. So that money created a lot of courseware that wasn't accessible. Some of it was in PDF, some of it was,
Wow. Yeah.
it was all over the place. So we supported one project with 17 colleges in Michigan. They spent most of their time arguing over what project management software they were going to use. At the end of the day, we had built a portal for them. They just wanted a website because they saw another college had a cool website.
Sure. Sure.
So, and then when that program was evaluated by the Urban Institute, it wasn't evaluated by whether it succeeded, but only if it lived up to what the requirements were for filling out the paperwork and turning in your courses. So opportunity lost.
Wow.
We then worked on a software called Job Signals to pick up demand signals from employers that could be passed on to colleges to try to line up their marketing, line up their course development. So what happened, though, is the community college system here in California put us in touch with a company that's now called Go Educate. And this was a really interesting situation where most of the things in ed tech and labor tech either come from grants or they come from, if they're lucky, from venture. But venture funding really requires really quick, turnarounds and quick scaling. This particular case, an individual who had been a large-scale systems engineer in the Air Force and then in Global Cellular, got to the situation I described. His kids were entering high school, and they thought they could just pop on the web and find what they needed. Couldn't find it. He had somebody he went to church with who was a real estate developer who said, let's build it. It's really not that much different from a mixed-use real estate development where we try to put everything in an ecosystem. So they by the time they met me, they'd already spent $4.5 million. And instead of hiring a couple people in a back room to build this, they went to a large Fortune 500 back-end company called Axion Labs and really built something that's like Amazon strength.
Oh, wow.
So when they came to us in the nonprofit, they didn't know the education space. And our executive director had built and supervised building the CalPass data system, which is the California's K to work data structure where you can computations inside of that. And we looked at this thing and said, my God, this is real and it can go on the web. We went to the labor data people, showed it to them. We went to some large community college operators, and they said, this is where we need to go. So in NLET, in our nonprofit, the way we work is if we can find a successful technology, whether it's a company or a nonprofit, we will then try to figure out how it could enter the slipstream in the education and workforce environment and work around all the obstacles. So we set this up in the beginning at a small college in northern New Mexico, which is high desert, high poverty, Hispanic serving, high drug use, low bandwidth. But their major employer that needs techs like crazy is the Los Alamos Laboratory. That's operating down there. And then we got in deeper with this platform and realized that one of the reasons these things don't exist, Ahmad, is because to make a marketplace work between a person, programs, and jobs, you have to get the employers on one side, you have to run around to the other side and get the learners on. But what this system does that nothing else does is two things. One, it takes all the course catalogs and we can scan them, scrape them, and it turns them into a skills language.
Oh, wow.
We do the same thing with the job postings. So let's say that we went to Merritt College, we took the catalog, we put it in the system. It would automatically pull in open jobs that are related to those courses and programs. Now, even better, If
Wow.
we went to an employer, say it's Chevron in the East Bay, and said to them, "Hey, you need all kinds of people. We need to know exactly what you're after. I mean, we can put your postings up anyway, but we'll give you a profile. You can bring in people that have gone through the system, that are working there, that can communicate back to people like them who might want to come to work there. We can explain what our jobs are." And then for the learner, we have in this Go Educate product, there's a free AI resume, and you can have as many of these as you want. Once you start filling out that resume, it starts populating a skills graph that is then part of that. And then there's free career exploration that's also AI based. That then goes into your profile as a learner. And this whole intent here is to have a LinkedIn for people long before they would have LinkedIn, whether they're
Sure.
coming out of high school, whether they're opportunity youth and they've been passed from one program to another, they're returning incarceration, justice involved individuals, or they're people coming out of the military.
Yes.
We need this bottom part of the lower third of the triangle to make all our companies work. We don't have enough people at the bottom. And then LinkedIn and Indeed and ZipRecruiter, they're just swapping people that
Yeah.
already have a background.
No, I agree. And I think, one of my critiques in this whole kind of workforce ecosystem is, you hear the companies that are saying, there's a talent gap, we need more people, but they're not investing. They could speak it, but they're not investing in order to open up the base that you just showed there. And I would love to see more of that.
We need to
And
give them away. But let me tell you what the large scale problem is. So anybody who's doing good work in this area, they can generally find the money to build what they need,
sure.
right? But building a product or a service is only one piece of the activity. So you need 3x or 5x for marketing, thought leadership, and to get this transformational mindset out there. Otherwise, people use the old framework to analyze what you've done and they don't quite know what to do.
Yeah.
So the problem is we don't have any public private funding mechanism to assist this market change. So plenty of people making tools, and I think this Go Educate's one of the best, but there's no support for doing this, and it's kind of odd. The state of California has spent almost $1 billion for a project called Cradle to Career on the data
Yeah.
side.
Yeah.
They've got the California K-16 collaboratives, and they have the Pathway grants, almost $1 billion.
Yeah.
None of those things addresses an individual having a technology. It's simply going to a community college and saying, "Hey, oh, well, maybe you should work on this. There's a big grant coming out." And people meet, they build PowerPoint slides. They might put up a rinky-dink piece of technology, if anything, and that's it. We're in a state that has the best technology development in the world, and we have human capital needs,
Yeah.
and we're just pushing the money out. And I want to tell you, I'm not going to name names. Talked to the governor's office about this. I've talked to the community college chancellor's office about this. It falls on deaf ears. They just put out programs and they put them into the existing system. And if you say to any one of those people, and including venture funders, "Hey, don't you have a cousin or a brother or a sister and their kids are having trouble finding work?" Yeah, they'll say, "That's amazing. There's nowhere to go." I said, "Well, what are you doing with all this money? Why isn't there R&D going in this direction?"
Yeah, I mean, wow. So with the community college system or just the educational systems here, but I'll focus in on the community colleges. You're absolutely right. So there's, depending on which chancellor or the person who's head of the vice chancellor of, let's say, workforce and economic development, the names of these programs change, but the structure stays the same.
Absolutely.
And what happens a lot of times, and I think you and I had a kind of an offline conversation about this, or at least an exchange, where you have these incentives to create these collaboratives, but really what they end up becoming is just human gatekeeping
Yeah.
groups. And they could never do the work that technology could do to really close the gap between all of the different stakeholders that really need to be about how that transition, how the flow
Yeah.
of information, data, and work opportunities happen. And you know, you mentioned one of those, the Pathways grant. I happen to be part of a district that received $30 million of that. And of that $30 million, each college may have received less than a half million, and everything else went somewhere else to partners.
Yeah.
And there was never any technology that was created in this. And so I kept telling the people who was running this, at the very least, set aside $200,000, and that's just say $200,000, and get someone out of Silicon Valley to bring all this stuff together where teachers, instructors, and dual enrollment, all these type of things will not have to be passed and exchanged through humans. It can happen like online.
You're absolutely right. So you're right. The various pieces of this just keep churning in the same cycle. And it's kind of odd that people wouldn't say, in all cases, am I helping individuals? Am I helping more individuals? How do I know if I'm helping them? So those questions to me, I couldn't go to sleep at night if I were receiving a big salary and I didn't have answers to those questions.
So one of the things I've seen as well is, in this changing future of work, there's two things that's going on. You see that, when you talk about AI and automation, all reports say that the job titles are changing constantly. Like I think 50,000 job titles that's used in the industry will change over the next couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And also from another aspect of titles, you also see that titles are just simply irrelevant when you look at the different ways that you can skill stack and how you could utilize individuals. So what can we do about that? How can we get individuals to identify their talents where it's marketable or where it connects with employers in a way that is not just simply about the title, but really about a body of work that reflects on them?
So in this Go Educate system that we're supporting from the nonprofit, all of the players can be in there. So the learners can be in there. The best thing in the world would be to bring them in 8th or 9th grade and their parents and get them an account on a system. In the Go Educate system, they're able to see, oh, if I went to, Cal State Fullerton, they've got a specialty in this. I'm kind of interested in that. And oh my gosh, here are the jobs that are there. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, the employers that are working in that area, they can be communicating, if that person agrees, through a talent exchange, which is in this product, where they're saying, we're looking for people that have this background. And it turns out that this college's programs line up to it. So let me give you an example. So again, immense frustration with the way the traditional system operates. So we hooked up with a really interesting person who used to be the Assembly Senate Majority Leader, wonderful guy. He's now a lobbyist, but I would say he's much more than a lobbyist. He cares. Mm-hmm. So he took us around the California Assembly, and we met with 12 Assembly members and their staffs. Okay, now the Assembly members generally older. The staff are really bright, the most brightest kids you're going to see in 23, 25, 26, 27. So we showed this Go Educate system to them. The Assembly members said, just like you did, why don't we have this? Why isn't this what the workforce boards are supposed to be doing? Why aren't they connecting all the dots, connecting individuals? What happened with the young people in the room? They got very anxious and said, hey, can I show this to my brother? Hey, can I show this to, I've got an aunt, she needs to see this. They immediately knew what it was, because nobody needs instruction if you're 25 years old on a well-constructed system. So then we would have tabling events where there would be a Go Educate table outside of, I think we did this at Sacramento State, Go Educate and some giveaways and stuff. And people came up and said, oh my God, they signed on to the system and said, oh, look, I can see what courses line up to what jobs. You said, boy, I wish we had something like that at this college. Well, of course they do. They have a career services office.
Yeah.
But when they go into that career services office, it would take a long time for that career service officer to know what that person's all about. These kids, these younger people, this is just native to them. So, so what we have to do, I think, and it's not just pushing this particular technology, but this class of activity, we have to open up people's eyes to this. So it's going to take more communication. It will eventually take, like if we got into Kaiser, for example. So there's a large organization that has a large stewardship role in our state. If we got into a large semiconductor companies, we need stewards and sponsors on the employment side to say, hey, we need a lot of talent and we're going to need to pick it up in ways like this, not the other ways, because look at your numbers. Your college numbers are going down, your graduates are going down. So at this point, it's about the PR and communications to change mindsets. And that's a little bit where we're stuck.
Right. One last question, because I know you have a hard stop. If you could, and this is a big topic that we'll probably need to do a part 2 on, but if you can just kind of give me a real clean version of the insertion of AI into the educational space and perhaps some of the tools that you've talked about. How do you see this, or how would you like to see AI play out in this space right now in terms of its impact on learners?
I think the best thing it can do, and of course it's going to be a while until all this is sorted out, the best thing AI can do is assist people doing things that they already are doing, but they can do much better. So let's say in the math field or any learning field, it should be very easy for somebody to have an assistant or something that would help them through their whatever they're studying. The context, the creation of items to learn. And then the point you made earlier is that education really to work and training has to be context-based. So if I'm somebody who knows how to work on cars, then I need to have examples that are within that. If I'm really abstract and I like to think about things in a very different way, the AI should be able to figure me out pretty quickly. So there are systems that are coming along like that. To think of it as a complete answer is not right. To think about it as extending the roles that humans play so that we don't give them, so we take away the busy work and we let both the learner and the person that's teaching or the person that's connecting them to opportunities to use their time wisely. That's where we need to go. And I think you're going to see large scale changes. But again, we're up against a traditional system that's already 2 clicks behind. And the thing I'll say, I don't know, another example in California is it used to be a nightmare to go to the DMV, right? I know you're going to smile. So, get an appointment, wait in those lines. DMV works really well online. And if you've got a problem that you can't solve, then you do have to go into the office, and they tend to keep the appointments now. So
I was surprised by that, actually.
Right. So if the DMV could do it, it's shame on us if we can't do it in education and workforce.
Absolutely. Well, that's a great way to put a pin in it right there. I think that's an excellent example. So once again, man, I want to thank you for this conversation. And because you have so much knowledge, and I can probably go several other hours, I would love to consider you to be a friend of the show where I can bring you on some additional times to have conversations about these topics, because I think you really do bridge the gap between kind of the big topic and the actual technologies that are on the ground. Making it happen. So I want to thank you. Where can you just name the Go Education, the site?
So the URL is goeducate.com. So it's go and the word educate.com.
Great. Thank you very much, Gordon.
Thank you, Ahmad.